Helen Marlette. I am head of school at Buffalo Seminary, and it is my pleasure to welcome each of you to Reunion 2021. As the whole year has been for us here, it is a different way to reunion, but in some ways it is wonderful because I see people from all across the country. We were able to remain safe and still join together. This afternoon, I have a simple task to introduce two very well-known people to you. The first is Harry Schooley, who joined the faculty at SEM in the fall of 1967, and he taught history here for 38 years, with a little hiatus, 5 years at Hathaway Brown School in Cleveland during that time. And many of you know Harry as Mr. Schooley, known for his demanding history classes, but he instilled a love of history in each of you. Lauren entered SEM the same year as Mr. Schooley, 1967. And as Harry and she was lucky to have Harry as one of her teachers, who instilled in her love of history that she now brings to each of us through her books and writing. But Harry and Lauren are simply known as friends to me and friends of SEM. I did not get the pleasure of knowing Harry as a teacher, but as we know, he's teaching us all the time. And Lauren and I had the pleasure of meeting a few years ago in New York City. And we played a little introduction game, and my daughter Liza, who's a class of 13 graduate, had the pleasure of getting to interview Lauren. And afterwards, she was so excited. She said, "Mom, Lauren, she was nice, she was friendly, she was smart. She engaged me." And that is how I know Lauren. Also, both have, whenever called upon, given generously of their spirit and time and knowledge to SEM. Last year's graduating class was unable to have an in-person graduation. And I called Lauren and I said, would you, might help us? She graciously wrote a personal note to each graduating senior, along with a copy of her book, City of Light, for them, in an effort to try to make what was a difficult time for them a memorable graduation. So it is my pleasure to introduce two of SEM's best, who share generously, who are brilliant, and who continue to care and give to the institution and their communities as much as they can. So Lauren and Harry, it's my pleasure. I can't wait to learn from both of you.
Thank you, Helen. As you so graciously mentioned, Lauren and I both started at Buffalo Seminary on the same day, September 11th, 1967. She was a freshman, and I too was fresh, right out of college. I taught the freshman history course. Thank goodness I did not ruin history for Lauren as an academic pursuit. It's a privilege and honor for me to be sharing this program with her today. Our topic is a pictorial look at the world of Buffalo Seminary then and now, the then being at the turn of the 20th century. The inspiration is Lauren's City of Light.
Well, thank you, Harry. And let me say first, it's such an honor for me to be here today speaking to my fellow graduates. When I think back to my first day at SEM and sitting in Harry's history class and just feeling that kind of life come into me, because Harry's enthusiasm for history has always been so infectious, I think it really filled me from that first day and stayed with me through my years at SEM and then through the years afterward when I would visit Buffalo and always stop by school and seek out Mr. Schooley. So to this day, it just touches me very deeply to be able to share a stage, as it were, with Mr. Schooley today for this presentation and to bring our mutual love of Buffalo history to life. It's taken me a very long time to go from Mr. Schooley to Harry, but I am going to try to call him Harry during our presentation because he claims to prefer that from graduates. But I may slip up once or twice because of the immense respect that I have for him and for everything that he's given me through these many decades. You know, as I say, not just those 4 years at SEM, but all the decades since. So thank you, Harry, for that. You know, when I got the idea to do the book City of Light and set out to do the research, I really felt as if a door was opening in my mind into the world of SEM's past, into a world that really had been in front of me all along, whether along Bidwell Parkway and the archives at SEM, the wonderful buildings of Buffalo. You know, all of that was there when we were students, but I, for one, never saw it. And the process of writing the novel was kind of opening up in my own mind of all these things that were around me all along. I do want to say that in the novel, I changed the name of SEM to the Macaulay School. And I did that because SEM wasn't yet located on Bidwell Parkway, which is a good segue because now Harry will tell us something about the early history of SEM and where it was in 1901. Harry.
We see on the map locations accented in City of Light. And the location of the Sinclair estate, as was from the book City of Light, is at the location of SEM's Larkin House today. The Macaulay School is on the same location as SEM's Bidwell campus is today. And a few of the other sites that are indicated on this map, we will be looking at in the course of this presentation. Lauren mentioned the parkways. This photograph was early, probably black and white at first, and then colorized. And it demonstrates the beautiful extent of the parkways that were the Olmsted creation in the 1860s and were all in place by 1870. We see SEM in the background of that picture. It wasn't there in 1870, of course, but the parkway and the gardens were there. And today, that same view would be showing the Larry Griffiths sculpture, Birds Excited into Flight. So there's a piece of then and now. We know SEM today is located where the Macaulay School was in the book, and we see it there on that map. But in 1901, SEM was here on Delaware Avenue, sort of almost midway between its original campus at Johnson Park and the Bidwell campus today. So that's where we're going to begin. Between 1900 and 1909, SEM relocated to the 20th Century Club building and a nearby former boys' school called the Heathcott School. And this relocation was temporary, pending the new building of a new school somewhere else. But it's interesting that SEM moved out of its home campus on Johnson Park without first having a new building. It would be 9 years before SEM had a permanent home. So we see the 20th Century Club as we're familiar with it today, but the Heathcott School is a parking lot. When City of Light's Louisa Barrett was headmistress of Macaulay, Miss Elizabeth Gertrude Angel was principal of Buffalo Seminary. And we see this very imposing formal portrait of her, photograph of her in 1905. And Lauren is going to tell us about Miss Angel.
So Miss Angel was headmistress of the Buffalo Seminary for 49 years. I think that's just an astonishing figure to think about, because this is my 50th reunion. And so I think, you know, for a lifetime, she was the headmistress of the school. And I think that really shows us how she guided the school for, you know, into its prime. really. So she was born in 1873 in East Central New York. We don't know why her family relocated to Buffalo. She died 5 years after her retirement from SEM out in Colorado. Next. Here's her high school graduation picture, Buffalo Central High School. And then she went to Wellesley College.
It's interesting that she's right up front in that picture. It's exactly where you would expect her to be.
Right. And here she is. This shows the main campus of Wellesley in those days. They just had this one huge building, College Hall, which I'm told burned down sometime later. And now there are several buildings where this once was. Next. She was very impressively class president in her sophomore and senior years, part of the bicycle club. She was in the crew team and president of the banjo club. Now, this shows the crew team, and there she is circled and in red. I think this is very interesting. If you could go to the close-up, Harry, the women are wearing corsets for the team. And it was common, of course, in those days, women always wore corsets, but to think that they had to wear corsets even while doing sports is quite astonishing to think about, because corsets severely limit your ability to breathe. That was one of the purposes of them, that women could not be strong because you couldn't move quickly if you were wearing a corset. But the passion and commitment that they must have brought to athletics to continue doing it despite these physical restraints that they were under. Now here she is with the bicycle club. When I look at these outfits that they wore for the bicycle club, maybe it's my imagination, but I can't help but see here the inspiration for the gym outfits that we were required to wear when I was a student at SEM. I'm sure some of you remember those calf-length pleated black tunics that we had to wear, and we had to walk down Bidwell Parkway over to Larkin Field in these long black tunics. And I remember some of the catcalls we used to get by, from young men going by in cars. And that was quite something, but I think very much in the Miss Angel tradition. And here she is in the banjo club. And I just think this is a charming photograph of these women gathered to play the banjo with the Asian screens behind them. Now, during the course of research for this presentation, I learned for the first time about Miss Angel's yellow slips. And there are some graduates on the presentation today who remember the yellow slips, graduates who knew Miss Angel. And I'm hoping in the Q&A, they'll talk a little bit about what it was like to have Miss Angel give them these assignments. She'd give these little aphorisms. Here's an example of one. Life is just one damn thing after another. And the girls had 3 minutes to think about it and 3 minutes to write about it. And then Miss Angel would read aloud the best and the worst in chapel. And here's an example of, it's very touching, of a young student trying to answer this question and possibly having some trouble with it. But it shows the standard that Miss Angel instituted at the school, that you had to be prepared to think on your feet, to write just at the drop of a hat. She also had slogans or guidelines for life, she called them, and here's a list of them. We'll look at a few in detail in a second, but she would make the students memorize these slogans, and then she'd come up to the girls in the hall and just say, in nature there are neither. And then the girl would have to say, rewards or punishments, but only consequences. And God forbid they shouldn't be able to remember this. Just thinking about it is very frightening. The future comes not, she would say. And then you had to say, from before to meet us, but streams up over our heads from behind. And, we are born with our constitutions, but we make our own bylaws, and so on. So as you see, there's so many of these. And, as I say, it's quite terrifying to think about. I shall keep my brother true. I do think that's a phrase that all of us at SEM learned from the beginning, whether we had Miss Angel as our headmistress or not. The idea that we would stay true to what we believe in was always a very important part, well, at least of what I remember from my SEM education. It was under Miss Angel's administration that the Hornets and Jackets were instituted as the two SEM teams. I was a Jacket, I remember. I'd never been very athletic. I'm sure my classmates are laughing if they remember how unathletic I really was, but I do remember, being proud to wear the yellow ribbon and to be a Jacket.
The fact that in making this slide, I put the cup on the Hornet green is sort of symbolic of the fact that the student Hornet competition this year was won by, this Hornet Jacket competition was won by the Hornets. If we do this again in a year when the Jackets have won, I will switch the cup over to the yellow.
So some people have wondered if Miss Angel had a cult of personality at SEM, and her portrait was put in the library long before she retired. But I learned in my research for City of Light that all of the great women's schools in America, whether they were high schools or colleges, all of these women's schools for women were led by fierce, strong women who devoted themselves to their schools. In those days, married women were not allowed to teach. So women who made the decision to get married and have children, they had to leave their careers in the schools. So it was really created a world of women who, led these schools and really fought to the death for the future of their girls and to try to give their girls more freedom than they themselves might have grown up with. So again, I need to say, 49 years, she devoted her entire life to this school without much private life to speak of. This portrait came to the school in 1933, 1934, a gift from Daisy Larkin, the daughter of John Larkin, and she did not attend SEM, but she wanted the school to have this portrait. And Miss Angel loved dogs, and I think these two pictures are really very, very touching to show this personal side of her. And many people don't know, this was news to me, that Miss Angel was instrumental in founding a new Buffalo public school, the Lafayette High School, at the corner of Lafayette and Baines. It's still open for business, if you will, in this gorgeous, gorgeous building. There is a plaque inside, I'm told, paying tribute to Miss Angel and her contribution to getting this school up and running. Now, the seminary class of 1905 is here. These girls would have been freshmen in 1901, the year of City of Light. And they are particularly noteworthy because this was the first class to produce a yearbook, which they called the Seminaria. And I think the cover is very beautiful and a tribute to the girls working on their school's first yearbook.
The grand event of 1901 for Buffalo and the rest of the country for that matter was the Pan American Exposition. The Pan Am took place less than a mile from SEM's Bidwell location, but as we know, SEM was not there at that time. The Pan Am is very much part of Lauren's book. Unlike a World's Fair or other international expositions, the Pan Am celebrated only the Western Hemisphere and featured exhibits from the North, Central, and South American countries. Pavilion exhibits celebrated cultures, arts, and technological progress on magnificent grounds studded with dazzling buildings. And speaking of dazzling, the expo featured the wonder of electricity provided by the new power plant at Niagara Falls. The expo was indeed a city of light. But for all of its celebratory glory, there was also a stadium for spectacular equestrian and circus events and an element of garish carnival amusement, which among other attractions. Are we on fire?
New York City outside my window.
Oh, it
Sorry,
is.
everyone.
There was also a garish carnival amusement piece of the expo, among which the attractions included a German beer garden, Philippine, Japanese, Hawaiian, and African villages, and even a trip to the moon. The land for the expo was provided by the Rumsey family and covered some 342 acres north of Delaware Park Lake, between Elmwood and Delaware Avenues. And you see on this satellite map the extent of the grounds of the exposition and what neighborhoods they are today, between basically the railroad line to the north of Great Arrow and Delaware Park Lake. And so you can see the Delaware Park Meadow on the right, above that Nichols and Elmwood Franklin schools, and then very familiar street names. The Buffalo History Museum, it was the New York State Pavilion for the Pan Am Exposition and was the expo's only permanent structure. The exposition buildings were temporary, prefabricated wood structures coated with plaster and stunning sculptural effects also in plaster. The New York Pavilion, as we just saw, was one exception to that. And this was to be the other, the Fine Arts Pavilion, which is today the Albright Knox Gundlach Gallery. It was not completed by 1901. In fact, it would not be completed until 1905. So a temporary art gallery was speedily erected, and that was over near the area where the tennis courts are, at the corner of Nottingham and Delaware. And we see the Albright Knox over here on this map of the fairgrounds with the note still under construction. And it would be under construction for a long time. Lauren, the old
No, there were some presentations at the exposition that were horrifying by our standards today. And one of these was called the Old Plantation. This was a site that in real life upset Mary Talbert so much because of its false portrayal of enslaved people that she worked very hard to bring to the exposition a presentation highlighting the accomplishments of African Americans. I didn't know anything about this extraordinary woman shown here, Mary Talbert, until I began my research for City of Light. And I was so inspired by the battles that she fought against lynching and against racism in America that I felt I had to weave her into the book and bring her into Sem's story. And we'll learn more about her later on in this presentation.
The Temple of Music was the site of the McKinley shooting in September of 1901. And I included here just to show the general map, where it is on the general map of the exposition grounds. And here are a few photographs from the exposition. Vice President Roosevelt, that's Teddy Roosevelt, presided at the opening ceremonies in May of 1901. And we see in the pictures on the right, some of the structures that were on the exposition grounds, which included a Venetian gondola on a grand canal that basically circumvented the central portions of the exposition. But look at those structures and remind yourselves that they're all fake. It's all like theater setting, prefabricated cardboard covered with plaster. I guess it would be plaster that would somehow be treated as waterproof. And a city of light. At night, this place was spectacular. You see the electrical tower there all lit up. The other buildings, their outlines framed in light. And the famous Pan American Exposition poster, which was The Spirit of Niagara, designed by Evelyn Rumsey Carey in 1901, the Maid of the Mist. The exposition was to attract tourists, and Buffalonians took advantage of this opportunity, in some cases, to convert their homes into hotels. And I found this ad for the Bidwell Park Hotel. And these buildings still exist. They're right across the street from SEM towards Potomac. And as it says, they're new and fireproof, strictly first class, in the most pleasant part of the city. President McKinley was assassinated. Well, there was the fatally shot on September the 6th, 1901, receiving visitors at the Temple of Music. And the location of the Temple of Music is in the median, the marker for that is in the median of Fordham Avenue with Lincoln Parkway. And there you see it. The wounded McKinley was taken to the home of John Milburn on Delaware Avenue. Milburn was a prominent Buffalo lawyer and chairman of the Pan American Exposition, and it was here where McKinley and his wife, First Lady, were staying. And so the wounded president was brought back to this house, and it would be 8 days before he would succumb to those wounds and die. The Milburn House was located where the Canisius High School parking lot is today, another parking lot. Remember that during the exposition, SEM was housed on Delaware Avenue in the former Heathcote School and 20th Century Club buildings. And following an on-site evaluation in 1906, the New York State Board of Regents rated SEM one of the best schools in the state academically and one of the worst in housing and equipment. The bottom line, SEM needed a new building. The graduates would provide for that. They would purchase property at the corner of Bidwell and Potomac, a triangular area, as the site for the new school. Now, I've taken some liberties with photographs here to show that corner vacant. The extent of that vacancy runs up here. It wasn't vacant. There were the carriage houses or garages for the houses on the circle here lining Potomac at that time. The Melton Manor was built in 1900, both as apartments and as hotel space in anticipation of the exposition. And here's the design elevation for the new building, as shown in the Illustrated Buffalo Express in October of 1906. Boston architect, Harvard architectural professor George Newton would be the architect of it, built in the collegiate Gothic style, $125,000 or $3.44 million today. Actually, it would cost a lot more to build that building today. So there we see it on that plot, the new Buffalo Seminary. Classes began in that building on October the 6th, 1909. And we can see on the corner there, the porch of the house at 34 Soldiers Place. That, of course, would be replaced eventually by the graduates building, Westchester Hall, and a new addition to the building. Again, that parkway picture, okay? Only now SEM is in it and it belongs in it at this time. A postcard showing SEM in the 1920s, and notice the extent of the elm trees. Many of us older folks will remember those elm trees and the cathedral-like effect they had arching over the parkway. Lauren.
So the first class to use the new building was the class of 1910. And one particular senior remains very significant in our SEM lives today because of something she wrote in her senior year. And that is the song that has become our alma mater. She originally wrote it as the class song, but Miss Angel liked it so much, she decided it would be the alma mater. And that young woman is Mary Gail Clark. She was captain of the basketball team, a member of the Glee Club, and editor-in-chief of the Seminaria. She was also a gifted poet and composer who went on to have a career in music. Now, this is Charlotte Mulligan, who founded the Graduates Association in 1876 on the 25th anniversary of the founding of the school. And this is the first Graduates Association clubhouse, which still exists at Johnson Park. It was the first such building in the country to be owned by a women's club. And as Harry and I explored the SEM Graduates Association, I was struck again and again by the extraordinary commitment of SEM's graduates to continue learning and exploring the world. They created new places for themselves to gather for classes and lectures and book clubs, preserving the standard of learning that had been set for them during their years at SEM and that they wanted to continue throughout their lives. And I think that standard continued through my years at SEM too, because I continued to take adult education classes and join in book clubs. And there was, I think, at SEM, there's always been a kind of intellectual excitement that people want to continue with and put money down to help through the Graduates Association all through their lives. One of the great effects that the SEM education has had, I think, on so many of the graduates I know. And in this case, when SEM when the Graduates Association outgrew the first building that they had on Johnson Park, they actually bought a church shown here and then formed the 20th Century Club, another women's club dedicated to education, cultural enrichment, and tradition. And that club was renovated around the church to look like this, the 20th Century Club that we know today. And if you look in the back, on the side there, you can see the remnants of the tower of the original church. Now that I know that it was built around a church, the next time I'm in there, I want to examine it from the inside to see what other remnants might be present from that original church building. Next, Harry?
The house at 34 Soldiers Place, what we saw in the previous picture in the corner of the SEM building, belonged to a Mr. James Wilson and was purchased for $100,000 in 1928 as part of a campaign for a major addition to the building that would include a new gymnasium, the art studio, the Potomac Avenue classrooms, and the Graduates Association's Westchester Hall. And a lot of us who are viewing this today are certainly well familiar with Westchester as the graduates' headquarters, and others of the younger of us as a sort of an extension of Buffalo Seminary. And a nice drone shot done by Charlie Duffy of the Nichols class of 1970, who very, very enthusiastically flies his drone whenever I call upon him to take a picture of something from the air. So there you see the new additions as of 1929. In City of Light, we meet some of Buffalo's most prominent captains of industry, and they were all members of the exclusive male Buffalo Club. So it's nice that the graduates founded the 20th Century Club to be an exclusive female club. So there are a few of them: Milburn, the Rumsey brothers, John Larkin, George Urban, John Albright of Bethlehem Steel, Ansley Wilcox. The Albright estate on Ferry Street, that building was demolished in 1935, and this is the now. The ornamental gate still remains, but the rest of the property over those years since has been developed as residential property. Aaron Rumsey served on SEM's first board of trustees. That was his house at Delaware and North, and today that's the location of the Williams Butler House, which existed at the time of the Pan Am and SEM's being at Delaware Avenue. Son Dexter Rumsey, his home, Delaware and Summer, adjacent to Westminster Presbyterian, is today the location of the United Way. And remember, the Rumseys were instrumental in providing a great deal of land for the Pan Am and also for the New York State Asylum on Forest Avenue. Bronson Rumsey had this magnificent mansion at the corner of Delaware and Tracy, but it was behind this house that was fascinating. Right on that location now is Child and Family Services. Behind the house was Rumsey Park, and you can see on that map that it's bordered by West Tupper, Carolina, Tracy, and Delaware Avenues. Elman Avenue didn't exist at this time. It would not be cut through there until the 1910s. Behind the Rumsey house were the Rumsey Lake and Gardens. And this is just fascinating to see this. Try to imagine that that existed in that area of the city at that time. The Delaware Avenue Asbury Methodist Church we see there today, that's Annie DeFranco's Babeville, with this beautiful lake and these gardens. And F. Scott Fitzgerald recalled ice skating on the lake when he was a boy, then living in Buffalo. And over the 10 years that the Fitzgeralds lived in Buffalo, which of course was at the time of the Pan Am, they lived in 3 different places, all still existing, on North Street, Irving Place, and Highland. He was 12 years old when the family left Buffalo. So what is Rumsey Park Lake today? It's the Herman Badillo Bilingual Language School, Buffalo Public Schools 76. Quite a difference then and now. Mary Talbert. Lauren?
So Mary Talbert, as I started to say earlier, was a civil rights activist. And because I wanted to bring her into the story of City of Light, I created a fictional niece for her, Millicent, who became the Macaulay School's first student of color. Mary Talbert is someone who very much deserves to be better known, and I wish a nonfiction biography would be written about her. She was instrumental in the 1905 founding of the Niagara Movement, which was the precursor to the NAACP. She was a national figure in the anti-lynching campaign, and she went to Europe during the First World War and worked with the Red Cross there. So she had an astonishing life. Learning about Mary Talbert caused me to think about SEM's moves toward diversity. And this way, I learned that Joanne Lavon C. Bird, class of 1967, was SEM's first student of color. Now, we'll be talking to Joanne more later, but Joanne, maybe you could just introduce yourself to everyone right now.
Wow, I just love that picture. I wish I still looked quite that young. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for participating today. Back to you, Mr. Schooley.
And where and when did it all begin? We cannot do justice to our alma mater without briefly considering, and I'll keep this brief, its Johnson Park origins. It began in September 1850 with a meeting of prominent businessmen and Presbyterian clergy hosted by Stephen Austin at his home at 69 Delaware Avenue near Niagara Square. And that location today is the site of the former Buffalo Athletic Club. First SEM building, of course, was the Evergreen Cottage, formerly belonging to Buffalo's first mayor, Ebenezer Johnson. And the location today, or that same location today, is the Matthews Building in the 280 block of Delaware Avenue at Johnson Park. Goodell Hall, STEM's academic building, would be built in 1952 and served as the classroom building until 1900. That would be behind the Evergreen Cottage. And so you see the relationship of the two there on the map, the original Johnson estate and what remains of Johnson Park today. The New Phoenix Theater, which we saw earlier, is right here. If you can see my cursor circling that building. The building on the left of the cottage is the Hotel Greystone on Chippewa Street, and that dates from 1897, and today that's luxury apartments. And so there's Evergreen Cottage, Goodell Hall on the Matthews Building and its parking lot. And in 1975, we celebrated the 125th anniversary of the founding of SEM by unveiling a plaque on the Matthews Building. You see Ted Reed there and Mr. Frank Matthews in that ceremony. The entire school was bussed down there for that event. The plaque is still on the building between Buffalo Optical and Evergreen Health. We see it today, okay, from a Google Street View map from 2020, and we superimpose upon that what was there back then. Not very well done, but you get the idea. And that parking lot was where Goodell Hall was. And with this slide, we conclude our presentation. We see the class of 1905 and Miss Angel. Miss Angel was the living link to all three SEM locations. She was hired in 1899 when the school was on Johnson Park. She was assistant principal and then principal when the school relocated to the Heathcott School site on Delaware Avenue and remained so in 1909 when SEM moved to its present location. Thank you, Miss Angel. Oh, and there's one more. Hey, Lauren, why don't we do a program on SEM's history 54 years from now?
I love this picture, Harry, and you know you haven't changed a bit.
Thank you, Lauren.
Well, thank you all very much for being here. And we have time for questions, and I think Juliana is going to organize the questions for us.
Yes, we had several questions. I'd like to start off asking Joanne. Joanne, you've paved the way for SEM to be the multicultural and diverse community it is today. SEM is currently a boarding school that houses people women from all over the world. Can you please tell us a little bit about your experience and how the current SEM culture of diversity and inclusion makes you feel?
Actually, I'm very excited at the direction the school has taken. And I actually came home a few years ago and brought my daughter and brought her over to SEM. And in fact, it was around Christmas time, so we got to go to the little fair, and she was so totally impressed and actually very angry with me. She said, well, you should have sent me here. We just could have moved to Buffalo from North Carolina. But that was wonderful. My experience was, it was always very interesting. To me, it was, I was trying to think about this over the last few days. I think the the biggest impact on me was actually the size. It was education in miniature for me, because coming from Buffalo Public Schools, where every class had to have 30 people or just wasn't a class. I remember sitting in class the first day, and I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting for the rest of the class to arrive, and I look around and, this 6 people, this is it, so that was kind of impressive and also very good for me. It made me certainly more accountable. It made me certainly more well prepared, because I knew that, yes, you were going to get to me at some point. The things I enjoyed the most was, I really liked, I think it was a more mature spot for me as far as education. I felt like I was more in control of what I wanted to do and what I was interested in. I love the fact that at the end of the school day that you had that one period that was incorporated into the school day where you just chose whatever your interests were. I remember library club and council on world affairs, all those things that I could be active in and choose as part of my school day. Not like perhaps some other educational settings where it would have to be something where you actually physically, you stayed after school and, you know, it wasn't as integrated into you as a person. My favorite person in the whole world at the school was Mr. Foster. He was a wonderful English instructor. He was a very supportive person, I always felt. And one of the favorite things he did for me was he had a movie club, and I'm a big movie person. So foreign films and this sort of thing. And at the end of the day, that was one of the things, you belong to the movie club and sit there and watch these movies. And God bless Mr. Foster. I know that we have lost him just recently.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I know it's kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I could go on forever.
No,
but
I was just going to say, I know that Mr. Foster is near and dear to a lot of hearts, and it's unfortunate that we just recently lost him. And my heart goes out to everyone who found him as a favorite educator, favorite principal. I know there were very many of those people out there. I have Ethel that wanted to share something about Miss Angel. So Ethel, go right ahead.
Okay, to this day, if I hear a rumpus behind me, I will not turn around and look at what's going on. And the reason is that Miss Angel used to stand in the back of chapel with her dogs, and she would say, with everybody sitting facing front, "Oh my goodness, look what happened." And whoever turned around to see was asked to please leave. It's very bad manners, according to Miss Angel, to turn around when something is going on and you have to pay attention to it. So as I say, to this day, if something goes on behind me, I don't turn around to see what it is. It's automatic because of her, because of the good manners she installed. Also, when we was sitting at lunch on benches, she would come down the row and put her finger down our back if we were slumping forward. So good posture was something else Miss Angel taught all of us.
So what did all of you think about those yellow slips? And
I remember them very well. I was scared to death when I would come in and see a yellow slip on my desk. It was a scary thing to have to think so quickly, but a wonderful lesson.
so in the long run, you felt that you gained a lot from it.
Well, not right then, not the 4 years.
Right.
Since then, I'm very grateful.
And the mottos too that she forced everyone to memorize, have those stayed with you also?
In quietness and confidence shall be your strength.
Oh, that's a very good one.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. I've used it frequently through the years.
And did she also have people memorize poetry and
Yes,
quotes from Shakespeare?
yes. I can't remember it all, but my sister Ruth, who's class of 1945, can still quote several of the poems that Miss Angel taught us. She was wonderful. And I believe she was 77 in 1950. I figured it out on paper. I can't believe that was her age.
And did you find there was a warmth from her? Because she seems so focused and fierce in so many ways. But
I never saw any warmth from her. When I was called in to speak to because she told me the crowd I was in, I should get into a better crowd because they were leading me astray. Little did I know, she told them the same thing, other people that she called into her office. No, she was formidable for me.
that's very divisive, though. It sort of turns the girls on each other. Is that how you experienced it?
I didn't pay much attention to it. We used to go out between classes and get in the cars. Sometimes we would smoke.
Smoke.
Yes, we smoked. We wore lipstick, we would cross our leg. When I was there, when we wore tunics, you weren't supposed to cross your legs. You're supposed to cross your ankles. And no lipstick. This was 1946. I graduated in 50.
Tribute to Miss Angel. I'm a member of the 100th graduating class, and there were 8 of us who were accepted at Wellesley College, and we all went there. And I still remember her, Miss Angel, walking so tall and so straight. And as I look back, I think I want to stand up straight too, because she was such an amazing woman.
She was.
Does anyone know when the girls stopped wearing those long black pleated gym tunics?
I think it goes into the 80s, actually. I can't, I've never been able to get a consensus on when the tunics were abandoned. But I certainly remember them from my early years there.
But we used to wear them. We used to wear them for the whole day, not just for gym class.
For the whole day?
With long black stockings, yes.
Wow.
When I started in the fall of 1982, they were still offered. They weren't long though, they were short.
Right.
And I never wound up getting one because I'm like, I refuse to wear this thing. So they weren't required, but they were available. People still did have them. And Cricket, I see you're on. Did you get one when you were there?
Oh yes, I still have it.
Oh my God, I remember, like, I think Ellen used to, pin her, like, letters on there.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yes.
yeah. And
That's
some
right.
people had them, like, all decorated, and yeah, but I never got one.
I showed the freshmen a photograph of the tunics when I was doing a presentation to the freshman classes, and they said, gee, that's sort of like Egyptian hieroglyphics.
As always, I've learned much from both Lauren and Harry. I actually got my notepad out in the middle and started taking some notes. I learn every time, and the one thing that I think is very true, and particularly when we are in a reunion celebration or reunion class, there is, as Miss Angel said, that kind of guiding rod that it is for me, I think, that stabilizing force, that stabilizing thing that you all have experienced. And I only get to vicariously through now being at the school, but it is something special. And I do hope that everybody will join us this evening so we can celebrate together, reminisce some more, and certainly come back when you get a chance, or ask for another Zoom. The one thing I've learned in the last 18 months is that Zoom is pretty effective for getting together. So if you can't get here in person and you'd like to learn more about what's happening today, what's going on, would love to have you back. So I will see you all this evening, and I will relocate from under Miss Angel to our courtyard where we would be outside celebrating on this beautiful evening when we get back together. But thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Harry. It is always a pleasure to listen and learn from you.